And hello once again, Barry ZeVAN here with FYI, and my guest today is a lady named Marysue Moses, and she's with Ebenezer Senior Housing Community and specializes in dementia. And it's something about which has been talked quite a bit and is talked about even more. Marysue, welcome.
Thank you. It's really good to be here.
Great to have you. And first of all, you've had quite a background, which, in my opinion, these days, there's nobody, as was the case maybe in the 1930s and 40s when I was growing up, when all of a sudden you were cut and dried and you did this and you did that.
Right.
And that was it. So please tell us about yourself and how you got into the subject of dementia.
Yeah, all right. Well, I started out in the theater. I knew I wanted to be an actress, and I had done theater in high school. We did the play Hamlet, and that was very important to me. I developed a lifelong interest in Shakespeare after that experience. But anyhow, majored in theater in college and ended up working for the Illusion Theater in Minneapolis for about 16 years, and then went on to have my own theater-based training company that dealt with workplace issues. So we developed scenes around these issues, and we worked with experts in whatever field it was. Sometimes it was attorneys, sometimes social service folks, or whatever, and they would lead discussion after the presentations. And then, somewhere along the line during the theater at work period of my life, that was the name of our company, my mother got dementia. And I knew nothing about it. Nobody in my family knew anything about it either. I was the youngest of 5, and we were all clueless. So we got very curious, and I guess I particularly got curious. And I remember when I visited my mom in her very first memory care community, I was so taken aback at how little there was for her to do. I was just appalled. It seemed like the activities person came around once a week with paper and pencils, and they were doodling or something. I don't know. I can't really remember exactly what that was. But anyhow, I figured, well, I can bring her something to do. So I started creating a little one-person show that I called Tales from a Trunk. I got a trunk on wheels, and I put stuff you could touch and stuff you could, different sound makers and props, different sensory items in it. And I adapted stories, I adapted Shakespeare. And I took this trunk on the plane with me when I went out to Denver to visit my mom, and then I would do these presentations for her and other residents. And I realized that was really fun, and started thinking about seeing if I could go into healthcare. So I did finally land a job as an activities coordinator. I worked for St. Therese Southwest, which is now called Glen Hopkins, in Hopkins, Minnesota, for almost 12 years. And then I came to Ebenezer. So along the way, I did get my master's in gerontology. I thought I really needed a little more background in aging, because what I really had was my experience with my mom, my experience, doing these presentations as an activity for people. So anyway, it's been a wonderful, wonderful fit. I love the training, and I do get to interface still with memory care residents every so often. Sometimes I get to work on special projects, and that just kind of feeds my knowledge of dementia whenever I get to do that. So that I told my boss that was really important to me, to be able to keep in touch with the people.
There are so many questions, one of which would be, are there different levels where people reach a certain level and they lose quite a bit of memory, then all of a sudden maybe it comes back for a while, or is that not the
Well,
truth?
there's certainly ups and downs, I would say. I think dementia is so very individual. You know, we divide it into phases. You know, some people divide it into seven phases. Some people just talk about 3 phases. And the truth is that that can be useful to kind of have a starting point for how you're going to approach and work with the person. But, you know, people are individuals. They have damage in their brain in different amounts and different places. So no 2 people are going to, you know, really follow the same pattern. So I just think there's a lot of variation. We really need to focus on the individual and not get too caught up in the generalizations.
Yeah.
But certainly people have good days and bad days, and there are some types of dementia where memory loss isn't even really a big part of it. Which is surprising for some people to hear because we focus so much on memory loss and we think it's all about that. And that's just one part of it. It certainly is a major part of Alzheimer's disease, but there's a lot more too. There's, you know, a whole different set of skills that are impacted that make it really difficult for a person to manage their life, manage their day.
So dementia then is a part of Alzheimer's, is that correct?
Dementia is the big, broad umbrella. Dementia is actually above Alzheimer's. If you imagine a diagram with an umbrella and the word dementia on it, that's the big category.
I see.
Okay, so and dementia is not a disease in and of itself. We hear people talk about Alzheimer's and dementia all the time, and we confuse them, or we think they're the same, or we think maybe one's worse than the other, that when dementia gets really, really bad, it turns into Alzheimer's disease. And that's not really true. That's not the correct way to think about it, because Alzheimer's disease is a specific disease, and it happens to be the most common type of dementia. But there's many, many types. There's well over 100 different types.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so if I have Alzheimer's disease, there's no question about it, I have dementia. If I've only been diagnosed with that very general term dementia, and there's been no more specific investigation into what type of dementia that might be, well, maybe I have Alzheimer's disease, maybe I don't. We just really don't know yet.
Is there a point where perhaps in the early stages of dementia, you can really discuss with the patient, this is what you have, and here's to what you can look forward, or is that a no-no?
Absolutely. I mean, in the early, I'm so glad you asked me about the early stage of dementia, because I feel very, very passionate about this. There's a lot of work being done right now in our country and our society, probably all over the world, to kind of remove the stigma of dementia, at least lessen that stigma, and to support people in early stage to continue to have purpose, to have a joyful life, to be thought of as having a disability, really, you know, not unlike other disabilities, but thoroughly supported in leading the best, most productive life they can lead. And there's an organization that I'm really interested in called the Dementia Action Alliance, and they do wonderful work there. If you Google them, you'll get to their website and you'll find all these wonderful blogs, and there's a toolkit with questions that caregivers can use with their loved one who's just been diagnosed. I've heard so many horror stories at this conference I went to down in Atlanta a couple years ago from people in early stage dementia. I mean, they had people in early stage dementia, a major part of the conference, sitting up there, you know, in a panel, and one by one they went down the row and talked about their experience of diagnosis. And the basic experience was that as soon as yes, you have early Alzheimer's, and when that was given, well, for example, one person who heard the news, as you might expect, he burst into tears. Well, the doctor left the room, and 10 minutes later, the doctor's assistant comes back and hands this guy, Brian, and his wife a prescription on a prescription pad. and says, the doctor says to come back in 3 months. That was it. Just horrifying. And somebody else was told you really have to go home and get your affairs in order. And it's like, this is just so wrong. People can thrive in early stage dementia much longer than most of us realize they can. And I think we really do people a disservice if we only focus on the deficits and the losses of dementia. People with dementia have strengths, and they are people too, and they can have great joy. One of my things I like to say in training is that what I want us to do at Ebenezer is to make it so dementia doesn't matter to these folks that we're working with, no matter what stage they're at. They can have joy. When they're engaged in something, when they're involved in something that really captures them, they're just people having a good time. And dementia is not a problem for them or anybody else in the room. When dementia matters, then it's a real problem for them.
So, in other words, do most of them accept it when they've been diagnosed? Accept it in a good way, I should say. Pardon the voice, by the way,
no,
folks.
That's okay.
The last stages of pneumonia, but I'm not contagious anyway.
Yeah. Well, I really can't speak for most of them. I've only known some of them. I'm sure it's very difficult for some people to accept. I kind of veered off from your original question there, but I think you were asking, what were you asking? I'm sorry.
Oh, I've forgotten too.
Okay, I'm sorry.
This is a dementia program. That's a bad joke. Anyway,
Okay.
It's not meant to be disrespectful,
okay.
of course. But I guess I was asking the levels, the degree of acceptance so that they can go on, especially when you're with the Ebenezer people. They can go on with life and not have it dictate their lives.
Right, yes. Well, I think that's really true for folks in the early stage of dementia. And of course, we have people in all different stages in our communities. By the time our folks with dementia are moving into a memory care community, they are most likely at the point where they have forgotten that they are forgetting. So with many people with dementia, there is a point where they're not aware anymore that something is wrong in their brain. Now this is really going to vary person to person, but there's a little saying: if you remember forgetting, that's okay. If you forget you forgot, that's not. Because when you start forgetting that you are forgetting things, then that's when you're really going to need some help to manage your day. It's like if you have a doctor's appointment and you forget about it, and they call you and say, Barry, you forgot your doctor's appointment. Well, you would say, oh gosh, I'm sorry, let's reschedule that, right? Because you'd probably remember that had happened. But if you had a more advanced dementia where you had forgotten that, you might say, I never made an appointment with you. You're not even my doctor,
Oh, yeah.
So it makes it really tough. So I would say the people in our memory care communities are needing lots of assistance. That's why they're there. But people can manage very well for quite a long time with the right supports in place. One of the things that's available online now, and when I heard about this, it made me feel so much less scared of getting dementia myself, because of course with my mom, you can't help when it's been close to you, you can't help but think, what if that happens to me? You can get a mentor online, and if I'm ever diagnosed, I'm going to do this on day one. You can go online and you can get a mentor. That would be somebody else who has early stage dementia, who has been living with it for a while, and they can coach you and they can mentor you and give you some compensation strategies. There are compensation strategies for people with dementia.
Would that be connected with Ebenezer too?
That is not specifically connected with Ebenezer, but I'd sure like to bring it to Ebenezer. I mean, I have been attending these Dementia Action Alliance conferences. I'm about to go to another one in June, and we are very interested in innovation at dementia care and in dementia care. And I was just thinking this morning about how we could really do a lot more for our folks in assisted living and in our independent living if we can do more to promote these supports when people are first diagnosed.
You've already given one example, but are there other examples of people who think all of a sudden they have dementia or Alzheimer's, and what's normal and what's not normal?
Okay, I think I know what you're saying. So, yeah, I mean, it's quite normal for us to lose our keys, for example. Not know where. This morning, I couldn't figure out where I had put down my glasses. And it took me a good minute and a half to come upon them in my home. Perfectly normal to forget things like that, but. With something like keys, forgetting what keys are for, or forgetting that I even have keys would be quite a bit more serious. Same with losing your car in the Target parking lot, which I assume every human being who has ever been to Target more than 10 times probably has done.
Yeah.
Especially if you go in when it's like late afternoon and you come out, it's Minnesota winter and it's dark and we're distracted, we're thinking of other things, we're thinking about what we're going to buy when we go in. Perfectly normal to lose your car. However, if you walk out and you can't remember what your car looks like, or you can't remember how you got there, that is more serious.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
I know myself, not to inject, I do it every program. That's a little
you go right ahead.
Personal thing. I have actually had times, and they haven't been too frequent, when I'll be walking through the house and then all of a sudden everything goes blank. And I say, where was I headed? Why was I headed there? And all of a sudden it's a brick wall. And then maybe as many as 2 minutes later it comes to me.
Yep.
Is that a
That's
danger
normal.
sign?
No, I think that's normal. I think as we age, the brain slows down for one thing, and the details get harder to remember. So I think we've all had that experience of going down to the basement to get something and I have no idea why I'm here, and then we go back upstairs and boom, if we're lucky, it comes back to us.
Yeah.
So I think that's distraction. It's just normal aging, but the time to worry is if you're really starting to have trouble managing your day. Forgetting little things and why I came here and why I did that probably isn't going to severely impact your ability to get through a day and do what you're planning to do or supposed to do.
Is it still in the formative stages, or has the healthcare industry learned why this happens?
Why dementia happens?
Yes.
Well, they're still trying to figure, there's always a why behind everything they figure out. They've figured out for Alzheimer's disease that, there's these proteins that fold incorrectly, and one of them builds up on the outside of the neurons and one gets inside the neurons. So we know that, that prevents the neurons from communicating appropriately with one another. But why do they fold? So I don't know at what level they're currently. I think they are working now on trying to figure out those whys. But there's probably a why underneath every why.
Yeah. Is it too optimistic to think that if they eventually figure everything out, there will be a way to prevent dementia or reverse it? Or is that too much to think?
Well, I think that there's hope that it does seem like every time I go to the Alzheimer's Association conference, it seems like there's more there's more hope, there's more money being thrown at the research, but they always say, it's not going to be tomorrow.
Yeah.
I can't wait till I go to the conference when they say, guess what, it's going to be tomorrow. Yeah, I mean, I think there's hope that they can either slow it, stop it, prevent it. Probably slowing and preventing is more likely to occur than stopping it altogether. But, you know, who knows? I don't know. I'm not a scientist. I really can't answer that with any kind of authority.
You had mentioned earlier about doing the shows for your mom.
Uh-huh.
And does that kind of stimulation seem to help even the memory come back?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, creative arts activities are I think one of the best things out there for people with dementia, and that's something that Ebenezer is very, very interested in. We have a big commitment to lifelong learning, and one of the projects I was able to be involved in at one of our sites was a 6-month multidisciplinary project using Shakespeare, poetry, and music. So I was the Shakespeare person, and we worked with MacPhail Music Center for the music, and the Alzheimer's Poetry Project for the poetry part. And we just came every Friday for almost 6 months, and it was either one of us, 2 of us, or 3 of us working with assisted living residents for about 45 minutes, and then working with the assisted living residents, some of whom also had dementia. It was wonderful. I mean, they really stimulated their memories. There was this one guy who was, I can send you a link to the video if you want to see it, but he was sitting down like this and his eyes closed for most of the sessions, and then when we were talking about love and where is love, and he just perks right up and he goes, I found love very easily. And then he tells this whole story about meeting his wife for the first time. It was just amazing.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
That's
So yeah, I
outstanding.
think creativity in general is great, because you're using different neural pathways when you do anything new. Whenever you say it in a different way or make something up that you haven't done before, it's a very, very good thing for your brain.
Do you suggest to them when you're not with them that they, for instance, listen to the radio or watch television on purpose, or even a particular station that might play classical music or something that will energize them when you're not around?
Absolutely. I mean, again, that's going to be very individual, what gets an individual's creative juices flowing in terms of the type of music. But anything that we can give them that is stimulating in that way that they enjoy, is great.
Another personal injection here. A wonderful man who's not here anymore at Minnesota Public Radio, Jonathan Blakely. He's out in San Francisco now at KGO, but Jonathan gave me a little, in fact, he was on this program. He was the program director, news program director there, but he gave me this contraption, I'll call it. It's a Google where you can say, hey Google, play this or play that. It's a little round object. So one of my favorite radio stations of all time was WQXR in New York, with which you're familiar. And now they're all classical music. And so I keep saying, when I'm at the computer, hey Google, play WQXR, and then it'll come on with it. Then I keep saying, play it louder, and finally it's loud. But even for those of us who don't have dementia or whatever, to me it's amazing that something like that, or watching a film that we love, all of a sudden the energy comes back, and it makes the mind work better. So with your training in drama and show business, I can see how you would be extremely valuable in motivating these people to to say, hey, wait a minute, it has nothing to do with my dementia, but all of a sudden,
right.
I'm thinking better.
Yeah,
I'm thinking
exactly.
more.
Yeah, yeah. One of my favorite activities to do when I was working in activities was, I called it Learn a Little Shakespeare. And I would write, a line of Shakespeare, sometimes 4 lines of Shakespeare. I'd write it on this great big whiteboard that we had. And I'd ask the people to pick out the most important word in the line. They nailed it every time. These people with, middle to late stage dementia, they could pick out the most important word. Those of them that were verbal. Something like, my bounty is as boundless as the sea. What's the most important word? They all say boundless. If I say, what's the word that, the whole meaning of the line is tied up in? So then I would erase that word boundless. Wow. And then I'd say, okay, I'm going to say the words that are there, and you say the one that's gone. And I'd say, my bounty is as, and some of them anyway would say boundless. And we would keep working at it. And some sessions we had like 4 lines of Shakespeare that had turned into, blank, 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 blank. Mm-hmm. And then I would just say the whole thing with them at the end.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And they probably didn't remember it the next day, most of them, but I had a couple of residents who, if we came back to that same piece month after month, after a while they started to know it.
Wow.
Which I think is a function of the rhythm. It's sort of like music, so people hang on to that more. And there's passion in it, so there's like emotion. So giving them things that have excitement and enthusiasm and emotion and that connect with their own interests is all to the good.
In many ways, not to be solicitous, but you're in my opinion, extending their lives by what you're doing.
Well, that would be great. I mean, I just
at least
think
extending a better life.
Yeah, I mean, giving them more joy in the moments that they have, for sure. I think, and more moments where things are easy and not difficult, and where they can just be, where you can have fun.
We have about a minute now. How do people get in touch? If indeed that's what people should do to get in touch with you or Ebenezer?
Yes, we have a website, www.ebenezercares.org, and people can reach Ebenezer through that website. And there's a blog there where they can read your blogs as well as mine. You kind of took over my blog, did you notice?
I didn't know that. I did not know.
I had to tease you about that.
But no, it's a joy to have had you fill us in really on a subject that's so important every day and seems to get much more attention these days.
Good.
Deservedly so.
Yeah.
Thanks, Marysue.
Thank you very much.
And now it's shameless plug time. My book, I think I've memorized the title now. Marysue ZeVAN, My Life Among the Giants. It's available on Amazon, and it is not probably what you expect. It's not name dropping. It's a lot of gratitude for the blessing I've had to be with so many people who have been so powerful in this world and have been wonderful to me. So again, it's on Amazon, endorsed by Vice President Mondale and Sam Donaldson. See you next time.